Connect London is brought to you by JLL, Lend-Lease, and is powered by Unisu. Christopher Mortensen has travelled beyond digital silos.
Hi, I'm Chris Mortensen, one of the co-founders for Modulous. I'm here today to talk to you a bit about moving away from digital silos and moving more towards holistic data platforms that allow us to increase speed and efficiency within the design and construction industry. Really, we need to ask ourselves, why is that important? Our answer is it should be beyond just making a return on investment and making sure that we're making all the money that we can. For us, we've got two really big questions that our industry needs to help answer. The first is around affordable housing and the rapid urbanization that we're experiencing around the world. Like week on week, we're seeing about 1.5 million new people moving to cities. So if we look at the UK, for instance, we have about 4 million homes that were in deficit. And when we look at that, we're about 100 to 130,000 units short per year. So we know that we've got this huge deficit in terms of the ability for our industry to drive real change and provide the housing that we need. The other thing that we really need to consider is the fact that 195 nations have come together and signed the Paris Agreement. And really what we've done is we've systematically capped what our average temperature rise from pre-industrial times to 2 degrees. And where are we today? We're about 1 degree. We're about halfway there. And we recognize that as an industry, we account for about 38% of that carbon emission. So we're a significant player in terms of both pollution, but also in terms of our ability to help. When we look at these things are conflicting demands, right? So we've got one side where we have to build homes. We have millions and millions and millions of homes in this country and abroad that we've got to supply. And then on the other side, we're trying to make sure that we do it in the most responsible way. And when we look at how we've performed to date, well, it's obvious that we've not performed really well in terms of providing housing or providing the necessary housing, but also how we've performed in terms of environmental responsibility. About 75% of the buildings that we create are conventional. So what does that mean? That means they're code compliant or near code compliant. The next sort of 25% are what we say are green, right? So they go beyond code. They're probably a BREEAM or a LEED or a WELL standard, and they're pushing, but they're not quite sustainable. And then of the last bits, we have sustainable, so as much energy in, as much energy out. Then we have restorative and regenerative. And all that combined, it's really only about 1% of what we're making. When we look at what we need to get to for the Paris Agreement, we know that we need to move from a place today where 75% of what we make is conventional to, in just 10 years' time, we need to move to a place where everything is at least sustainable. And so we have this huge market shift that has to happen. And if we look as well as those numbers, not only do we need to make that shift, we've got to increase our production. So if we do nothing in this country in terms of increasing our production, in the next 10 years, our deficit's going to go from 4 million homes to 5 million homes. And just to bring that to a little bit closer, within London, from an affordable housing market only, we need about 40,000 homes between now and 2040 to satisfy the demand that we have. And in 2017, 2018, we produced 7,000. So you see this real gap in our ability to deliver. And so we've got this tension that we're dealing with. So then we start to look at, what does that design process look like? What is the current best practice look like? And if we look at that compared to, say, the design thinking methodology and overlay something that's very cutting edge and simplified in its thought process, we start with the end user, right? We empathize with them. We understand what they need. We put that together into a really robust brief, and then we start to generate those ideas. But because we live in such a fragmented industry, those ideas are being generated by everybody along that value chain, from the architects to the building services engineer to the structural engineer, et cetera. We coalesce around another idea, and then we learn from that and iterate. And so we're constantly going through this very human-centric iteration that's one slow and one inefficient. When we look at what the result of that is it's a number of finite design options, right? So we start out as a design team, and now these design teams are enabled by lovely design techniques and digital design tools that enable us to work faster within our silos. But really what we're doing is we're creating a finite number of design options. And the reality is those finite number of design options, they probably start with a brief, and then we underperform that brief in some way, whether it's cost or mix or performance. And then we iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. But there's a real cost here. Teams can only afford to do iteration so many times. And then the other side of that is the time component. We only have a certain amount of time to be able to run through this. So an option that we've been looking at is really looking at a digital design process that still focuses on those high-value, human-centric attributes that add value to the process. So we still want to start with that human-centric design bit up front, really understand who our customers are, who our clients are, who those homeowners are, really build a really robust brief so that brief is almost watertight. And then we push that into our digitally enabled process. And for us, that starts with a generative design process. So instead of having a finite number of options, we have not quite infinite number of options, but hundreds or thousands of options based on all the different rules that we've set. We automatically start to skim off the ones that aren't applicable. So if it's not code compliant, we get rid of them. If it's more expensive than our client's brief, we get rid of them. If it doesn't perform to what we need, we get rid of them. And then from there, we have this data-rich environment. We have this data-rich model that we don't throw away. And this is the key. So rather than having a siloed approach where we have something, we do a really robust digital tool, and then we pass that off to the next, and then they pick up something and they run it through their own tool. We're not trying to have these handshakes that lose efficiency or lose data. We're trying to keep this in a closed unit. We do live in a world that has data integration and digital integration. I don't want to say that our business or our industry doesn't, because we absolutely do. But the trouble that I think we see in the industry is the digital solutions mirror the fragmented industry in which we reside. We have a very siloed approach to the way we design. We have the designers, we have procurement, we have contractors, we have installation, and these things are all fragmented. And the tools that we're generating as an industry are fragmented to respond to those needs. And from our standpoint, there's some great tools. There's some great generative design tools out there that do some amazing parametrics up front, but then that design doesn't carry through. It's passed on to a design team. They may or may not take it on, and it just gets lost. For us, actually harnessing that data and harnessing that power and making sure that gets pushed or pulled to the appropriate places is really what we're looking for. And so for us, taking that thread and weaving a digital thread all the way through those silos to make sure we have a seamless process really is what's going to allow us as an industry to, one, increase speed, but also prioritize the sustainability requirements that we all need to have. And so when we look at how do we design a building now, one of the things that we do is this sort of additive approach, right? We've got this goal that we have, and we have an iteration and we test it. And then if it doesn't quite come out, we add something to it and we test it again. And we add again and we test. And right now we use all sorts of different digital techniques to do this, and it enables us to do this faster. We have more powerful analysis tools than we ever have that allow us to get to better solutions quicker. But we still are at an additive process. So how can we change things? If we look at a fully end-to-end digitized platform that has a robust generative or parametric design tool up front, we can iterate within that. So we have a goals-based approach. So rather than saying, we want to have a net zero building that's 100% affordable, let's see how we get there, we set those as rules and say, we want to have 100% affordable housing that's net zero. And we can only design around those rule sets. And then from there, we go through the rest of the process, taking that rich information and pushing it down the line without degradation and without losing information. Now for us, and this is just an example of a tech platform that goes all the way through. We start with that client design. We start with that robust human-centered human-centric, high-value information. We digitize that. We run that through a parametric or generative design process that only allows us to create options that are optimized for that solution. And so in this case, we're definitely looking at a return on investment for our development clients. We're definitely looking at trying to provide housing for those that are in most need. And we're definitely looking at trying to make a responsible design from the start. We're not looking at it as an answer after the fact, so it's built into the system. From there, we now have a model that is robust in nature, and we're not taking that information and throwing it away and having somebody else recreate it. We're taking that and pushing it and pulling it to where it needs to be. Right now, we'd love to be able to push that to a digital planning portal. It's not quite there, but we're ready, right? And we as an industry need to be ready for that. And then we take that same information from that same model, and again, rather than throw it away, we utilize that to interrogate our supply chain, to make sure that they have capacities within their systems so we can draw down from them. We work with our logistics partners to make sure that their warehousing capabilities are what we need for them to respond to our designs. And from there, all the information is just picking up the different processes as we need them to go. So we've gone from design to planning to logistics to procurement. And for us, we continue that to off-site assembly. So our assemblers, they get a digitized package, they understand when things are coming, and it really is around no loss of information. That ends with pushing information to the on-site installation team and effectively moving that to an in-use case where we get to use all the lovely IoT technology that we have in our burgeoning market. So for us, looking at that end-to-end digital transformation isn't about having the most efficient process in a certain silo. It's really about taking those really efficient silos and stitching them all together. We want to make sure that we maximize that efficiency across the value chain because we've got two big things that we've got to solve. We've got an ever-expanding need for housing across the world, and we've got a real climate change crisis and commitment that we've got to address. Thank you.